Record to. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Samaya, and I'm here with Stephanie, and we're here to talk about the UX Woman Spring 2025 cohort. So Stephanie went through the program and learned the end-to-end design process. So I'd love to hear, Stephanie, how did you discover UX in the first place, and what prompted you to learn about UX?
So my background is in speech therapy. I've been a speech therapist for a decade and was feeling really burnt out. And there are a lot of healthcare professionals that feel that way. So I found a course that kind of helped guide clinical folks in other careers that are, we can use our skills and our degree to pivot. And so that's how I found UX originally. And then I went down a rabbit hole of looking for ways. Well, originally I did the Google Coursera, and I thought that would be enough. And then, you start to learn and you realize how much you don't know, and how much more there is to learn. So I went down a rabbit hole of looking for more structure. I felt like I really needed kind of some accountability and something to come from my learning in the end that I could feel like I had something to show for it. Um, and I found a lot of boot camps, which I was heavily considering, but they were really expensive. And the reviews that I was reading was just kind of that, people come out of those with like a lot of cookie cutter. They come out with the same um, projects. And I had listened to a couple of podcasts on UX, and they talked about that like, hiring manager wasn't super impressed by that. And so I kept looking, and I found yours. And the price was right. The amount of time was right that I could dedicate because I was still working full time. And so it just made sense. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. Something where it's like not it. I don't have to hide my background as a speech therapist. I actually can highlight my experience in healthcare through the project that I choose. I was really excited when I found your course. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I'd love to talk more about that. The fact that, most boot camps tell people to go for entry level roles, but, as career changers, there's a lot of skill sets that are transferable into UX. So how did you kind of combine those two worlds as you were starting the course, really leaning into your speech therapy expertise, but then also choosing a topic where you are the expert and you're going through the design process, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely felt a ton of imposter syndrome when I first started the course because I remember getting off the first class call and was just like, oh my God, this train is going so fast. Um, but the further we got into it, and speaking with Valerie, my mentor, who has a background in healthcare too, I did start to kind of slowly but surely like shed a little bit of that imposter syndrome and feel more confident that, okay, I have 10 years of experience, not just as a speech therapist, but like in a very professional setting, and, and work experience before that. And um, felt more and more comfortable speaking confidently about that and not in a way that I felt like I needed to cover it up or be ashamed of pivoting. So I think actually being able to choose a project that made so much sense in my head, because I started to feel like an expert. Like, oh, I don't know a lot about design or UX research, but I know about therapy. And so I think having that as like a grounding force, while I was doing all this new learning helped me, I don't know, like feel more comfortable in that new mindset of I'm a speech therapist and I'm a UX researcher. Kind of like having one foot in both camps, if that, makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, that makes sense. And how did you hone your project topic as the expert and then also learn new things about that topic? Or did you learn new things? Were your
Um,
assumptions challenged?
I ended up choosing a physical therapy topic, so only because they're more like primed to have an app. They're kind of homework exercises more than speech therapy. Um, but I know a lot about PT, and so I felt comfortable there. But it was funny because I had a pretty strong sense of what I wanted to do, and Valerie challenged me and said, "Are you sure that there's nothing else like this out there?" And I was like, "No, I've looked. Oh my gosh, I'm the only one that has had this idea." And she's like, "Okay, I think you should look again." Not that she knew, she wasn't positive there was something, but she kind of had that sense of, I bet this has been done. And how are you going to, make it unique and put your own brand on it? And so I started to look in a more skilled way, from some of the things I was learning in the research portion of, um, like learning how to utilize AI to help me find all sorts of different companies that are out there that are similar to what I am or ancillary to what I am that led me down other rabbit holes. And I did. I found a couple of products that were pretty much exactly like what I wanted to design, and I was crushed. Um,
Yeah.
we're having to start over with my idea, but that was such a good learning experience because, and I told so many people this, I just felt like I got too far down my dream of this is what I want to do, and I didn't stay neutral enough. And that's really what I learned in your course with so much of research is like we are the best researchers when we step back from our buy-in to it and we just listen to what's out there, what's the
Yeah.
research saying. Um, so I forget if that answered your question.
Yes, definitely. I can totally relate because we all get into our own rabbit holes and what we're really excited about. And that's why I think design is such a collaborative process because to have those sounding boards from Valerie, from Yasmin, from Ilona, you're like, okay, that idea that I thought was like the one may not be the one. And then you just keep refining and you evolve into a whole other space you never thought you would get to. Um, I'm curious, as you were hearing from to continue on the research section, as you were kind of collecting data from these interviews and your ideas were evolving around what the product should be, how did the business model and the business thinking come in? And when did that kind of click between the user experience and the business side of things?
My app ended up being B2B. No, yeah. Um, but it ended up having like two sides. So it had like a client facing side and a therapist facing side. And so I felt kind of challenged on how to structure the business component. But from the research, I was surprised. I thought that the research was going to tell me that the patients just needed an endorphin boost to sit down and do their exercises. I was not surprised to hear that the therapists were very frustrated when their patients don't do their exercise, because that's how I feel as a therapist. Um, but what I found was that the patients are actually highly motivated because these are working people. They're young, they're fit, they're annoyed that they're injured. And so I think I ended up making my business platform being something that the PT would pay for, and that would be a way to draw in customers who they want to do the exercises, but the materials they're given are terrible, and they're frustrated by that, not by having to do exercise. And so it felt like, okay, if the clinic offered this kind of fancy app that held you accountable and offered you, science behind your exercises, that would be a draw to a young, active customer versus just kind of maybe your average outpatient PT where they're just farming you through.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I love how you kind of focused in on who the target customer was, to, really build a business model around it and show that they were actually motivated to take on these exercises. I'm curious, as you got into designing it, you mentioned that these materials that the clients were getting were not the best materials or maybe not the most user-friendly. So how did your app, in terms of the design and the UI, take care of that lack of user friendliness in the current system?
the biggest thing that came out of my research from both the patient and the therapist was that they both wanted it to be a video of themselves, either the therapist videoing their own foot or videoing the patient's foot right there in the session.
Okay.
So instead of having this kind of building this giant library of exercises, which is what a lot of the platforms have, um, everybody told me it would just be easier because my foot looks different than that person's foot that's in the
Mm.
average random video. It would just be easier if the PT was videoing my foot and then giving me the feedback on, okay, well, make sure you stay on this side or whatever. And so I incorporated the main component of my platform was just that it was really, really easy to point and click, point and shoot a video from the platform, upload some written directions, and boom, you're off.
Yeah.
Um, it's like easy access on both sides of the app.
Yeah, and that's so completely different. There's so many video repository type apps that it just becomes repetitive. And I love how this is such a differentiator and it's such a new way of thinking. And it's very in line with a modern audience who's young, active, and just wants something on the go. So that's great that you were able to let go of that idea of the video repository because it's so easy to, think that that's the solution for
Yeah,
everything. And go with something completely different, which is great.
yeah,
So you should
yeah.
be really happy and proud of yourself. How did you feel once the whole product came together and you were doing your finals pitch?
I was shocked at what I made. I mean, I just feel so in awe that in 4 months I could go from, I don't know what I'm doing for my next career, but I know something is out there to I kind of have something to show for myself. I have a portfolio now.
Yeah.
Um, I felt really proud of it. I was not as good at the design, and I felt like those classes went pretty fast for me to keep up with, because I don't have any design experience. So it was definitely the research stuff really just I understood it better from like a deep standpoint because in my field I do a lot of interviewing.
Yeah.
Um, but I did the best that I could and I came out with a product that worked. So I was pretty proud of that. I just kept, I kept thinking this feels like in terms of the design component, it just feels like time in the saddle. I would get it. It was learnable. I just needed more and more practice. I just didn't have time for it with working and trying to get the product finished. So,
Yeah. And that's understandable. We were telling you to build a whole product in just 4 months. Like there's no expectation for it to be perfect. It was just supposed to be functional.
yeah, I really appreciated in Alona made us do some like presentations throughout her course, which, we hadn't done with you, I don't think, throughout.
No.
And that was scary and nobody wanted to go first. And, but I just really appreciate the kind of constant message like, this is something you have to do when you work in iterative processes, which is like constantly come to your team and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is where I'm at. What do you guys think? And so kind of being comfortable doing that. And so the feedback I got when I did my little mini presentation, it felt vulnerable, but so useful. Some of the feedback she gave me was like, oh, I should have thought of that, but I didn't. And so I'm really glad that I was vulnerable and let her kind of, give me a little critique. So that's great.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think it's a very friendly environment. It's not, we don't grade anybody or like fail them or give them an A. So it's more about, what you can improve, what's really working with your platform, because that's what the real world is like, right? It's either success in terms of revenue generated or conversion rates, or it's going to be, hey, we didn't get the metrics we needed. So there's never going to be that graded feeling. I guess I'm curious, going into the career coaching, you chose to kind of pause a little bit after the curriculum to kind of, gain footing in your current role. But, what are your goals in terms of a UX career or how you look at your career moving forward?
Yeah, I just started a new job that I happened to get like the week that our course finished. And it was a job that's not clinical, but also not UX. So kind of it's somewhere in the middle where it's more administrative. But I feel like I don't know what's next for me because I'm just really invested in the job that I have now. Um, but I feel like in the 4 weeks that I've been at that job, I have already pitched several times. Hey, how are we looking at the users? Like the other day, I was in a leadership meeting, with two other people that I don't really know that well, but I'm like, I just have this lens now of what are we doing with the users? Are we thinking about them? And the conversation was about, are we going to make this huge programmatic change or are we not? And we were sitting in a conference room talking about it, three people talking about changing service to hundreds of thousands of people in my city. And
Wow.
I, what we have two users here. We have the people that are, the end users of our transportation product, and we have the drivers that are in the city all day doing a lot of this transportation. Like, do we survey them? What are we doing with research on these people? And so I just feel like UX is kind of constantly now filtering throughout my day, my conversations, my decisions. I'm giving that advice to some of my contractors that I'm advising. They were also looking to make program changes from the top. And I said, hey, what if we just ran like a quick
Yeah.
survey or questionnaire with the people that are doing your work
Yeah.
that are most impacted by these changes? And I just feel like so often people are like, huh, yeah, like my boss was like, I wonder what the drivers would say. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I brought this up to somebody else who works in UX because I felt like she would understand. And she gave me the best line. She said, yeah, you're gonna get the feedback. You can either get it before you make the changes or after. And I was like, ah, what a good way to phrase it.
That's amazing. That's perfect advice because, yeah,
I know.
research is a lot of risk mitigation, right? You're de-risking all of what you're putting out there because you've already got the feedback ahead of time rather than reacting and then like scrambling when the product or service doesn't work out.
So I feel like it's just making me look less like I have this one career background and more like I'm this well-rounded person that can show up to a conference room table and
Yeah.
keep up, and that feels really incredible.
And I guess I'm curious too about hearing about, I know you're settling into this job. It's still pretty new. So when are you potentially going to look for more UX research or UX related roles? Or are you potentially thinking of growing UX practices at this job and role?
I think I really want to grow UX practices. I don't think there are any, so there's a lot of room for growth.
Okay.
Um, so my focus now is just to keep kind of putting these breadcrumbs out there of, hey, what are we thinking about the users? How are we doing research? What is that design like? And
Yeah.
a lot of this is about accessibility because I serve people with disabilities.
Yeah.
So making sure like that lens is constantly coming up, not just in the written materials that we give, but in like the experience that we're providing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So I think that I could see myself pivoting from here into a UX researcher role. That was my original goal. So I've already started to keep a spreadsheet at work of like ways that I'm in, projects that I'm working on that I feel like have a KPI at the end that I can talk about maybe in my annual review.
Yeah.
Um, but the ones that I have on my spreadsheet are all UX because I think that's just like so easy for me to
Yeah.
see now.
And I think it's intuitive for you now because you built a whole product from scratch. You set up the research and design practices for your startup product idea. So this is, not new to you to be able to set it up at a new company or bring other folks along on this process as well. So I think that's really great to hear and something for me to take away as well to be like, okay, how do we empower more students in the future to set up their own practices? And d work on the design process in their own way and style, right? Because the design process is the same, but how we apply it, depending on the context, is so, so different, depending on the project.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we talked about, in the career coaching or like the end of our coursework was rewriting my resume. And I felt kind of confused about can I rephrase all of this clinical work as UX? But I think for people that are, needing to keep working or who are risk averse, about like just totally jumping ship and doing a 180, if
Yeah,
I had stayed in my clinic and I had said, okay, I'm going to give my clinic another 6 months, but I'm going to focus on implementing, creating UX specific projects and practices. I think that I could have put that on my resume too and felt more confident that I actually did intentionally do UX, not like, oh, kind of
yeah.
happenstance, accidental UX.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. And you're also now more able to scope UX projects because you've scoped your own startup idea. So you can kind of tell what is in scope versus out of scope and what's feasible because you're the expert at your practice as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think something that I took away from the course too is you go into these UX projects or things that you want to problem solve in your workplace and you just think like, okay, here's the problem. I just want to get to the end of it.
Yeah.
But if you're a good researcher, you start to really peel it all the way back, and you have to solve one little problem at a time before you can get all the way to the end. And
Yeah.
that's hard to be patient, but I recognize now like
Yeah.
the good research and good design takes time, and you need to not rush it.
No,
Yeah.
we all have that urge, like, oh, I have this brilliant solution in mind, or oh, like, what if I could do this or this? And yeah, the patience and taking it one day at a time or one week at a time, because I know it can be overwhelming if you're thinking of the whole design process. I guess kind of to wrap up this call, what would you say if you had advice to give for someone who's in your shoes, who's thinking of a career change into UX? What feedback or what advice would you give them?
I would say do it. UX is a really fun space to live in, even though I don't have a UX specific career. I use it now in my work every day just by, having learned it. It kind of changes your mindset. And so I think also it feels really scary to pivot because, especially as a healthcare worker, I sat here for so long and I thought, I only have this trade. I'm not qualified to do anything else. I've put all my eggs in this basket
Mm.
of speech therapy. And I feel like taking the leap and working with somebody like you who's kind of holding your hand and every week encouraging you and saying, you can do this and you're worth more than just that one degree that you got or that one career that you had. A lot of people have multiple careers.
Yeah.
Um, I think going through this course is really what like broadened my mind to accepting I can do something else and starting to feel like excited about it and seeing myself in a different way. And by the time that I got to the interview with this company, the job I have now, I felt so able to talk about myself in a way that wasn't just pigeonholed and
Yeah.
in like a broad spectrum of skills.
Okay.
Um, and I think without your help, I don't think that it would have been that easy. So,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Talking about this, we really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the timing was all meant to be in Kismet, but like I had to work so hard to get through the coursework because it was a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
before my advice is before you do this work, just know, I mean, I think you told me in our like kind of onboarding call initially,
Yeah.
you're like 3 10 hours a week. And I said, okay, that feels doable. But I
Yeah.
think it was more like 15 or
Okay.
more for me.
That's good to
Um,
know. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe that was because I read stuff sometimes. I like went down a rabbit hole and had to start over. Or the design work was harder for me. So I spent more time. But yeah, I think if you give it the time it requires, like if you can really be dedicated to it, then you'll get a lot out of it. So much.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for this. And yeah, thank you. I'll just pause the recording there.
Mhm.
Pause.